were running high, fans were in disbelief, and within hours, the story had gained an independent. Comment sections became battlegrounds. A claimed that angrily to such treatment. Others questioned the whole affair, wondering why such a grave charge would come to light in the absence of evidence. Some even claimed that the story was being made up to get attention, clicks, and views. However, the harm had already been done. It is almost impossible to stop a rumor like this once it reaches the general population. People started playing back previous interviews, looking for signs that this kind of blow-up was inevitable, including past disagreements and stressful times between the two. Others were concerned regarding the impact this would have on all parties concerned, particularly in light of family members and admirers. The public's perception of the family was split, and the internet quickly took sides. The fact the event is real adds to its intensity. The rage, the charges, the purported altercation, everything sounds like it belongs on a reality show. However, this time, the distinction between reality and entertainment seems perilously hazy. Additionally, additional pages are still sharing their own interpretations of the narrative. Fans are stunned, feelings are running high, and everyone is eager next. The narrative didn't blow up all at once. Like most online disputes, it arrived gradually and almost silently. Initially, there were sporadic posts with ambiguous remarks that suggested conflict between two well-known names. Screenshots, edited captions, and anonymous claims followed. They proliferated more quickly than anyone could identify their origin. The story had already taken shape in the public's consciousness before anyone knew what was going on. Mendeecees allegedly shouted something quite nasty to Tamar, according to what was being relayed. Words that immediately went too far. The term hooker woman started to recur frequently. It was always credited to him and was never supported by audio or video. But it was repeated so frequently that viewers came to believe it. The emotional weight that accompanied the scenario added to its intensity. Supporters weren't merely responding to rumors. They were responding to the meaning of the words. Many saw it as an assault on Tamar's dignity as much as her. Anger, incredulity, and disappointment were all over lines. Some wondered how someone could say such, especially in light of the public the two's past. Others quickly retaliated, telling everyone that there was no concrete evidence and that reports on the internet were often distorted beyond recognition. The tone changed as the hours went by. Shock gave way to conjecture, which in turn gave rise to in-depth narrative. The versions online claimed that the purported remark wasn't made in a vacuum. People said it happened during a heated arguments were already running hot. According to some blogs, tension has been growing for some time. Unresolved problems were simmering beneath the surface until they eventually erupted. Once more, none of this was verified, but the manner it felt almost cinematic as it was being told. Then came the portion that really caused havoc on the internet. According to several rumor sites, Tamar apparently smacked him after becoming enraged and stressed. No video appeared, no public witnesses. It's merely a statement that has been said enough times to feel like everyone could visualize this scene. Fans responded right away. Some stated they said that far might lose control so they could understand her behavior. Point out that regardless of the provocation, violence was never the solution. The gap was sharp and instantaneous. The speed at which people took sides made it much more difficult. Tamar's supporters vigorously pointing out how frequently disrespectfully before being chastised for their emotional reaction. They contended that the was reasonable, actually spoken. Firstly, some questioned the narrative as a whole, questioning why like that. There was no concrete evidence to this event. They cautioned against trusting everything you see online, especially if it comes from unidentified sources. Before long, it was more than just the two of them, affecting old disputes, interviews, and real-life incidents. TV appearances looking for trends that would account for the purported conflict. New captions were added to the videos. Old quotations were removed from context. and all conversations were suddenly seen with suspicion. What had previously appeared to be innocuous drama was now being presented as proof of something more sinister. The emotional temperature continued to rise during all of this. Comment sections turned to become battlefields. One side accused the other of being a victim, blaming, while the other accused them of accepting hearsay at face value. Those who had followed both people for years began to doubt what they believed to be true. Some said that it unnerved them to see such a serious accusation turned into a joke. Nevertheless, they continued to observe. Drawn in by the story's intensity, the absence of formal pronouncements merely fueled the flames. There were 100 ways to interpret silence. Some perceived caution, some as guilt, and some as a straightforward reluctance to participate in the craziness of the internet. But when there were no activity took over, the number of theories increased, each one more spectacular than the previous. A story that was already incredibly emotional appeared to gain more depth with each successive post. The story's rapid transition from reality to reaction was what caught my attention. Individuals were no longer inquiring as to what actually transpired. They wanted to know about what they thought had occurred. Anger, compassion, incredulity, and curiosity all blended together to create a storm that could not be subdued. The public's perspective, rather than truth, had formed the story, which had grown larger than the persons involved. Even those who made an effort to remain impartial were lured into the discussion as the day wore on. It was difficult to remain neutral when the subject was so prevalent. Timelines were constantly updated with fresh perspectives, fresh charges, and fresh feelings. A few fans attempted to slow things down, warning others that gossip may destroy lives. But these voices were frequently muffled by more emotional, louder responses. One thing was evident by the time the initial shock ended. The impact was already tangible, regardless of the veracity of the statements. Reputation scrutiny. A minor rumor had escalated into a full-fledged online spectacle, stirring passions. People were no longer only observing a narrative. With each comment, share, and response, they were taking part in it and influencing it. And the truth remained elusive amid all this cacophony. There are no denials or confirmations, just an intensifying tempest of conjecture. The circumstances had gotten to the point where even clarity might not be able to repair the harm that has already been done. The narrative takes on a life of its own after the internet speaks. Whether anyone is ready or not, we're going forward. As the discussion continued to expand, something else started to occur that made the whole thing seem even more intense. People began responding to one another instead of just the rumor itself. Timelines with a lot of emotional back and forth. Lengthy discussions outlining individual viewpoints and contentious disputes between followers who believed they were the only ones who truly grasped the truth. Everyone thought they were responding rationally, which added to the complexity. Some fans began pointing out how rapidly narratives can be constructed when a tale incorporates strong language. Despite the fact that the story itself was almost completely based on unverified claims, the reported statement ascribed to Mendeecees was offensive due to its demeaning tone. It was uncomfortable even for those who weren't really familiar with either of them. There was a powerful emotional reaction to the notion that such things could be. Spoken whether or not they were genuine. And once logic frequently takes a back seat when emotion enters the conversation. A rear seat. Others reminded everyone that nothing had been confirmed in an attempt to calm things going. They questioned why so many people were prepared to accept a rumor in the absence of proof, particularly when there had been no direct statement, audio or video. They cautioned that social media had a tendency to transform conjecture into perceived realities just by repetition. However, their voices were frequently muffled by more theatrical interpretations and stronger reactions. Soon, the conversation went beyond the purported occurrence. People started looking into how prominent personalities and the internet interacted more broadly. Many noted how celebrities are frequently expected to address allegations right away and how seldom is silence honored. In this instance, the situation felt more dire due to the absence of an official reaction, while some saw the silence as avoidance. Others thought it was a wise decision to keep the situation from getting worse. Reaction content kept flooding platforms in the meanwhile. The creators repeated out-of-context clips, examined facial expressions from previous interviews, and conjectured about body language as if it were proof. The narrative grew increasingly complex with every new video. What began as commentary gradually evolved into full-fledged fiction with imagined dialogue and poignant backstories. The distinction between storytelling and reporting got more hazy. Additionally, fans started to doubt the function of gossip culture in general. Some acknowledged that they were uncomfortable seeing such a private matter turned into public entertainment. They questioned whether it was appropriate to analyze someone's emotional response before learning the whole tale. On the other hand, some contended that public figures are constantly scrutinized and that celebrity brings this kind of attention. As the tale spread, the argument further widened the rift. More individuals started thinking about how rapidly people take sides in internet groups. After a story takes shape, it becomes challenging. It, without being charged with prejudice, is challenging. Those who questioned the account were accused of lacking empathy, while those who supported Tamar were accused of neglecting the facts. The discussion shifted from truth to allegiance. The ease with which a moment could be distorted was another topic of increasing controversy. Some said that even if there had been an argument, the online accounts might have been greatly inflated. In private moments, emotions can flow strong, and when those memories are recounted by others, they frequently lie subtlety. Retelling alone has the potential to turn a potentially uncomfortable interaction into a spectacular confrontation. The story started to take on a life of its own as hours stretched into days. Individuals who were not directly related to either person felt a sense of personal investment. Comments such as, "I can't believe this," and "I always knew something was off," appeared everywhere were common. Others acknowledged feeling conflicted and unable to turn away. The drama included the uncertainty itself. Some fans began pushing others to hold off on passing until they had more information, judgment. They served as a reminder of the harm that misleading narratives may cause, particularly when they entail charges that have the potential to harm people's reputations and mental health. Some even related their own experiences of being misinterpreted or misrepresented on the internet, using the scenario as an illustration of how rapidly, despite these appeals for moderation, the rumors persisted, since things sometimes get out of hand. The discussion was rekindled with each new post. Every ambiguous remark was examined. Every pause was deciphered. It became evident that passion, curiosity, and the human propensity to fill in the spaces were driving the story instead of facts. When data is absent, the people's perceptions of both parties involved appeared to be influenced by the emotional impact of the circumstance. Some started to reconsider their earlier beliefs, wondering if they had misinterpreted them all along. Others reaffirmed their support, stating that years of public conduct should always take precedence over hearsay. Anyone could easily see what they wanted to see because of the lack of clarity. One unpleasant reality became more difficult to ignore as the commotion increased in volume. The internet had stripped a rumor of its context and caution, turning it into a spectacle. What was left was a narrative that was driven by presumption, intensified by feeling, and maintained by ongoing interaction. By this time, the effect of the claims virtually overshadowed their veracity. The discourse had attained an odd equilibrium between indignation and weariness. Though many were becoming weary of the never-ending conjecture, people were still conversing and responding. They desired clarity, resolution, and something tangible. However, nothing of such kind showed up. The public's perception of the narrative continued to change, while the quiet and speculations remained. And one thing was certain as everything went on. This circumstance has turned into a potent illustration. of how rapidly stories may go awry once they enter the digital sphere. What started out as an unsubstantiated assertion has developed into a broad conversation about accountability, respect, and the price of public attention. Everyone watching was left wondering what, if anything, would ultimately put the drama to a close, because the ending was still unknown, but the impact was already evident. Beneath the din, something else started to emerge as the debate continued. Individuals were no longer merely responding on an emotional level. They were beginning to doubt the entire structure that made it possible for things like this to proliferate so quickly. Comments about how easily public opinion may be swayed were all over timelines. How a single rumor can develop into a whole story before nobody pauses to inquire about its origins. Many supporters acknowledged that they were uncomfortable with both the circumstance and their personal part in it. Some started to see how this trend resembled prior celebrity scandals. A startling assertion is made first. The responses follow, followed by the theories, and lastly, the split. Individuals choose sides, defend their viewpoint, and disregard anything that contradicts their account of what happened. In this instance, the purported altercation between Mendeecees and Tamar was more about what others thought ought to have happened than it was about what actually occurred. There was a strong emotional commitment. Some of Tamar's fans expressed strong displeasure, stating that she didn't feel like she had a chance to defend herself before being judged. They contended that women in the public eye are frequently subjected to harsher scrutiny, particularly when emotions are involved. They believed it was unjust that her response was being examined, but the alleged statements that caused it were dismissed. They wondered why the emphasis suddenly moved from what was stated to her purported response. On the other hand, some argued that physical reactions should never be justified regardless of what was said. They contended that this scenario, as reported online, raised questions about culpability on both sides, and that emotions do not justify behavior. This sit was advocating for a more balanced viewpoint rather than necessarily defending anyone. However, their remarks frequently provoked strong responses, demonstrating how delicate the subject had become. The story itself changed as the argument became more heated. There were several accounts of the purported altercation that differed slightly from one another. A heated debate in a private environment was described by some. Others said it took place in public. Some even said it was overly dramatic, with each recounting the specifics changed